The last stand at Sector 9. The stars were dying. Not literally, and not yet. But to Commander Velis of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet, it felt that way. From the bridge of the Dawn's Promise, she watched the tactical display flicker and fail as another Allied cruiser vanished in a burst of white-hot plasma. 17 ships remained. An hour ago, there had been 63. Commander, the Havern are forming up for another push. Her tactical officer reported mandibles clicking with barely contained panic. He was Kithraki, a species known for their calm under fire. That calm was gone now. Belger said nothing. What was there to say? The battle was already lost. Across the black void of Sector 9, the enemy waited. 300 Haven warships hung in perfect geometric formation, a living wall of kitten-hauled vessels that pulsed with bioluminescent menace. They did not hurry. They did not need to. The Haven Collective fought with the patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere left to run. They had been right every time before. All ships. Velris transmitted, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her claws. Pull back to defensive ring formation. Concentrate fire on their lead dreadnoughts. If we're going to fall, we fall fighting. Acknowledgements flashed across her console. Brave words from dying crews. The Havern advanced. Their weapons spoke first, lances of crimson energy that crossed the distance in heartbeats. The shield of Tyros took a direct hit, its shields collapsing like tissue paper. The Frigo Windrunner tried to evade, but the Haven fired in volleys. Predictive algorithms plotting every possible escape route. There was no escape. Velis watched ships crewed by people she'd known for decades simply cease to exist. Distress beacon is still transmitting, her communications officer said quietly. No response. Of course there wasn't. The Galactic Council had already evacuated this sector. The core worlds were preparing their final defenses, not to win, but to buy time for the evacuation fleets. Sector 9 was a sacrifice. Everyone here knew it. Everyone had volunteered anyway. Commander, the sensors officer's voice cracked with something that wasn't quite fear. New contact. Single vessel emerging from hyperspace at Mark 77 Alpha. Felris's eyes snapped to the display. A blue icon flickered into existence at the edge of the battle space far behind the Haven formation. One ship identification, she demanded. Unknown configuration. Hull signature doesn't match any known. Wait. The officer's tendrils froze over his console. It's responding to our distress beacon, audio only. Transmitting now. Static filled the bridge. Then a voice flat and filtered through translation software. This is the U.S. Retribution, responding to Galactic Council distress call. Arriving at your position. Stand by. Silence. You ask? Someone whispered. United Earth. Velis felt her blood run cold and bise, but not with fear. With something she'd thought long dead. Hope. The humans, she breathed. They actually came. The Havern noticed the newcomer. Of course they did. 300 warships began to rotate, weapons arrays tracking the single vessel that dared enter the killing field. Data streamed across Velis's screens as her ship's sensors finally got a proper read on the human vessel. It was massive, nearly twice the length of a Havern dreadnought. Its hull was angular and brutal. No elegant curves, no aesthetic considerations. It looked like what it was, a weapon. Gunmetal gray plating absorbed sensor beams. Enormous engine nacelles glowed with barely contained fury. They sent one ship, the tactical officer said, despair creeping back into his voice. One ship against 300. Then the Retribution opened fire. The tungsten slug crossed the distance at 30% light speed. It struck the lead Havern dreadnought before their shields could even register the threat. The kinetic impact was catastrophic. The dreadnought didn't explode. It disintegrated, torn apart by physics itself. Molten debris sprayed outward, catching 2 neighboring cruisers and crippling them instantly. The Havern fleet recoiled. Velis's bridge erupted in shocked chatter, but she couldn't look away from the display. The human ship was accelerating, burning straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Its engines left a trail of blue-white fire across the void. Beautiful and terrible. The Havern recovered quickly. They were a hive mind. Shock lasted only seconds. 300 ships turned as one and unleashed hell. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, kinetic missiles. Enough firepower to glass a planet converged on the single human vessel. The retribution shields flared like a newborn star held. Impossible, someone whispered. The human ship plunged deeper into the formation. Point defense systems blazing. Missiles died by the dozen. Energy beams scattered off angular armor designed to deflect rather than absorb. And all the while, those terrible railguns kept firing. Each shot was a small sun of kinetic fury. Each shot killed. Then the Retribution launched its missiles. Nuclear fire blossomed in the darkness. Not one warhead. Dozens. The void lit up with fusion detonations, each one powerful enough to crack a moon. Haven ships vanished in the expanding spheres of superheated plasma. Bellis realized she was standing. Realized her entire bridge crew was standing, watching in stunned silence, as the human dreadnought tore through the enemy formation, like a knife through flesh. The voice returned, still flat, still calm. Council vessels recommend you clear the engagement zone. This is going to get loud. The Retribution's main guns began to charge. Felris could see it on sensors. Massive energy buildup, far beyond anything the Council had ever fielded. All ships, she ordered, her voice shaking with something between terror and exhilaration. Full retreat. Get clear now. As her fleet pulled back, Felris watched the human ship stand alone against 300 enemies, and she realized something that would echo across every species, every world, every mind that witnessed this day. Humanity had gone quiet after the Council rejected their application for membership. They'd been dismissed as primitive, ignored, forgotten. The galaxy was about to remember why that had been a mistake. The wrath of Earth, the Havern Collective, did not understand fear. Fear was an individual response, a survival mechanism born from the knowledge that you could die, that your existence could end. The Havern were beyond such things. They were one mind across billions of bodies, one consciousness distributed through flesh and metal and the cold mathematics of war. When 10,000 of their vessels died, the collective felt inconvenience. But now, as the human dreadnought carved through their formation, like a scythe through wheat, something new rippled through the hive mind. Not fear. They had no word for it, no concept to frame it. But if they had been capable of such things, they would have called it doubt. The Retribution did not fight like other species. Galactic warfare was elegant, calculated. Fleets maneuvered at range. Shields absorbed damage, and battles were won through superior tactics and firepower over hours or days. There were rules, unspoken perhaps, but understood. War was a chess game played with starships. Humanity had never learned those rules, or perhaps they had, and simply chose to ignore them. The human ship burned straight into the thickest concentration of Havern vessels, engines screaming at full military power. Its railguns fired in a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Thum, thought, traveling so fast that relativistic effects turned the tungsten slugs into packets of barely contained physics. When they hit, matter didn't just break. It failed. A Haven carrier took a direct strike to its launch bays. The slug punched through 6 decks before its kinetic energy finally dissipated, liquefying bulkheads and vaporizing everything in its path. The carrier listed, atmosphere streaming from a wound the size of a city block. The Havern adapted. They always adapted. 50 ships concentrated their fire on a single point of the Retribution's forward shields. Combined firepower that could sterilize a continent hammered the same square meter of defensive field over and over. Searching for the breaking point, the shields buckled, wavered, held. Then the Retribution rolled. The maneuver was impossible for a ship that size, or should have been. Dreadnoughts didn't perform evasive maneuvers. They were mobile fortresses, trading agility for armor and firepower. But the human ship twisted like a fighter craft, presenting fresh shield angles while its point defense grid lit up the void. Thousands of small-caliber rounds shredded incoming missiles. Laser clusters burned through torpedo warheads before they could arm. And through it all, the main guns kept charging. Aboard the Dawn's Promise, Felris watched her sensor readouts climb into ranges that shouldn't be possible. Energy spike from the human vessel. Her tactical officer reported, voice tight. "It's massive, Commander. Bigger than our entire fleet's power output combined." "What kind of weapon?" Bellis began. The Retribution fired its main batteries. The beams were blue-white, almost too bright to look at, even on filtered displays. They didn't pulse or lance. They were continuous streams of directed energy that connected the human ship to its targets, like bridges made of starfire. The Havern dreadnoughts caught in those beams simply melted. Armor that could withstand plasma fire. Hull plating, designed to ablate under energy weapons, and none of it mattered. The heat was too intense, too focused. 3 dreadnoughts died in the first volley, just stopped being ships, and became expanding clouds of superheated metal vapor. Mother of the stars, whispered. The Havern formation collapsed inward, abandoning their perfect geometry for raw concentration of force. If they could not defend, they would overwhelm. 200 ships converged on the retribution from all vectors above, below, all sides. There was nowhere to evade. The human ship didn't try to evade. Instead, it detonated a ring of nuclear warheads in a perfect sphere around itself. The sensors whited out. When they cleared, Velis saw the aftermath. Dozens of Havern ships tumbling through space, holes scorched, systems failing. The retribution emerged from the center of the blasphere, shields flickering, but intact like a demon stepping out of hell's furnace. How? Someone on the bridge asked. How are they not dead? Felra stared at the tactical display at the impossible ship that refused to die, and something clicked in her mind. A memory from decades ago when Earth had first applied for Council membership. The human delegation had been polite but firm when the Council suggested they adopt standard defensive technologies. We appreciate the offer, the human ambassador had said, but we'll stick with what works for us. The Council had taken it as arrogance, primitive stubbornness. They'd been wrong. Humanity hadn't rejected galactic technology because they were too proud to learn. They'd rejected it because they'd already solved the problems differently. Harder ways, crudder ways, but ways that worked. The retribution didn't have elegant energy shields that could be calibrated and tuned. It had overlapping defensive fields powered by reactors that burned hot enough to make stars jealous. It didn't have sophisticated electronic warfare suites. It had so much armor that it could take hits that would other vessels and keep fighting. It was a ship built by a species that had learned to wage war before they'd learned to leave their own atmosphere. A species that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times, and somehow impossibly had survived. The Havern tried a different approach. Boarding pods launched by the hundreds. Organic vessels that could latch onto enemy hulls and burn through. Once inside, Havern soldiers would overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers. It was a tactic that had worked against every species they'd encountered. The pods reached the Retribution's hull, latched on, began to cut. Then the human ship's hull electrified. Millions of volts arced across the armor plating, frying every boarding pod in seconds. Those that survived the initial shock were blown clear by explosive bolts, tumbling away into space. A new voice joined the battle. Human, but different from the first. Younger, angrier. Nice try, you ugly bastards. But if you want on this ship, you're going to need to knock first. Laughter echoed across the comm channel. Human laughter. In the middle of a battle that would decide the fate of civilizations, the humans were laughing. Bellis felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of species laughed in combat? The Retribution dove deeper into the Havern formation, and now its secondary batteries opened up. Hundreds of smaller guns that Velis's sensors had almost missed. They fired solid rounds, primitive kinetic weapons that shouldn't have been effective against modern warships. But volume had a quality all its own. The storm of projectiles shredded fighter craft, crippled sensors, and turned the space around the human ship into a no-go zone of flying metal. Havern vessels that got too close were simply hammered into scrap. "Commander," her communications officer called out. "The human ship is hailing us." "Direct channel." Velra straightened. "Put them through." The voice that came through was the first one, the calm, flat one. But now, there was something underneath it. Not emotion exactly, more like satisfaction. "Council vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the U.S. Retribution. Sorry we're late to the party. We were a long way out when your distress call reached us." "Captain Chen," Felris managed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your assistance is Wudumbarum. We thought you thought we wouldn't come." "Yeah, we get that a lot." A pause. "The Council rejected our membership application." Said we were too aggressive, too warlike, not civilized enough for galactic society. Velis said nothing. She'd read those reports, had even agreed with them. Turns out, Captain Chen continued, being warlike has its advantages. Ma'am, recommend your fleet hold position. We're going to finish this. Finish? Velis looked at her tactical display. There were still over 150 Havern ships. Captain, even with your vessel's capabilities. Commander Velis, with all due respect, we didn't come here to survive. We came here to win. Watch and learn. The channel closed. The Retribution stopped evading, stopped maneuvering. It simply hung in space at the center of the Havern formation, engines at full burn to maintain position against the enemy's mass. And then it unleashed everything. Railguns firing in full automatic. Energy beams sweeping through formations like cytosthees. Missile pods opening and hurling their payloads in all directions. Point defense systems creating overlapping fields of fire that nothing could penetrate. The human ship became a sphere of pure destruction, death radiating outward at the speed of light and the speed of sound and the speed of hurled metal. Havern ships died in the dozens, then in scores. The hive mind, for the first time in its 1,000-year existence, made a choice, born not from calculation, but from something deeper. The Haven fleet broke. They scattered, abandoning formation, abandoning tactics, abandoning the system entirely. Their hyperspace drives flared, and they were gone, leaving behind only wreckage and the stunned silence of the survivors. Velis stared at her displays in disbelief. The Havern didn't retreat. They'd never retreated, not once in 100 conquered systems until now. The Retribution hung in the void, battered but unbroken, surrounded by the debris of 300 enemy warships. Its engines dimmed, its weapons powered down, and across every frequency and every language, the same message transmitted.